Welcome to industrialscripts.co.uk, home of the Insider Interviews, a series of Q&As with people currently working at various levels and in different areas of the British film industry. The interviews are absolutely exclusive to Industrial Scripts and can't be accessed anywhere else.
Into the blast furnace this month, we welcome BAFTA and Oscar-winning producer Gareth Unwin. This interview was produced by Evan Leighton Davis and edited by Steve McCarthy.
So welcome, Gareth, from your tour of the LA Awards circuit.
Yeah.
How is life right now? Is every day a kind of pinch yourself moment almost? Or?
It is. It's you know, sort of the stuff of boyhood dreams, really. I mean, we've the film's sort of run started down in Telluride as part of their festival back in October, and since then, you know, I've been able to sort of make myself available for nearly all of the festival screenings, you know, the sort of London Film Festival, Toronto Film Festival. And then, you know, at the turn of the year, we started to get all of the awards buzz. You know, the long list was issued by BAFTA, and we were sort of fairly well featured there. And more recently, obviously, the Academy Award nominations are out, and BAFTA shortlist is out, and we picked up 14 nominations. So it's nuts at the moment, but a good nuts, yeah.
What's been the kind of most surreal or exciting moment of this whole process, I guess the post-film process?
I think the best night was the night that we screened in Toronto. We played at the Roy Pearson Hall, which is a 2,500 person auditorium, which, you know, to give you an idea of size, that's sort of Screen 1 Leicester Square plus another 30%. And they really responded well to the film, but no one had warned us that they seat the key creatives in this particular row of the upper circle, and as the end credits roll, they bring up a row of spotlights on that row of seats. So we had, you know, 2,500 Canadians up on their feet doing a 5-minute standing ovation, and suddenly we're in the spotlight, and I'm misty-eyed from watching the film. I got my tie over one shoulder, I got popcorn all down my front, and suddenly I'm on my feet in front of all of these crazy Canucks going nuts over the film. So that was the sort of the most surreal moment that we've had so far.
Moving back to sort of the early years in the business, what first attracted you to a career in film and TV, and was it always on your agenda?
I'd always had a real appetite for films as a kid. You know, your usual sort of studio staple fare, E.T., Jaws, Close Encounter. It sounds like I'm citing everything that Spielberg did, which I think is probably fairly fair. But no, I mean, my destiny in my later teens was that I was going to follow a professional sports career. I was playing ice hockey in the Premiership over here, which, while that doesn't sound a whole hill of beans, you know, getting paid 50 quid a game as a kid, you know, and back in the 1980s, you know, that was a load of dough. So I was sort of thinking that was going to be my sort of life choice, was to progress a career in professional sports. And had a bit of a nasty accident that led to me having to sort of reconsider that. And I was actually driving my sister down to her A-level interviews, and I saw a bunch of guys at the college that she was going to be going to running around with cameras, and I got chatting to them. I had a couple of hours to kill while she was in her interviews, and we drove back up to Windsor and had to sort of explain to my parents that not only had Judith got into the college, but I'd also been offered a place on the course, and that I was going to be doing the move with them. And from there, I did my foundation at Weymouth College, and then got into Ravensbourne College in southeast London. Finishing that course there, basically I qualified knowing how to turn a kettle on, and went out and became a runner, and quite quickly moved from running to being a third AD. Stayed as a third assistant director for a couple of years. Second did a little bit, didn't really like that because that was more sort of office based than actually out on the floor. And so made the transition to being first AD quite quickly. I was firsting by the time I was 25. And basically I was a first for 13 years, and just started to realise that, you know, you only had so much power over how the film was shaped in terms of budget and schedule and time used on the day, and started to have aspirations to try and take a more senior position within the food chain. So I was looking at UPM positions, line producing positions. And it was at that point that I was just starting to sort of get my feet wet with more the production management side of things, that two sort of things happened in quite quick succession. The first one was that we were sent the stage play of the King's Speech. Basically, it existed as an unproduced stage play. And so that arrived, and at the same time, a very good mate of mine, Stuart Hazeldine, who I believe you've interviewed as well, sort of said, do you fancy a beer, do you want to have a bit of a catch-up? And during the course of this alcohol-supported natter, he basically said that he was interested in doing his first directorial debut. As you know, he's a writer of some note, and he wanted to sort of flex his directing muscle. And he said that he was going to back the project himself. He had a script that was ready to go, and was I interested? And I said, well, you know what, Stu, if I'm going to be sort of firsting this and line producing this, I sort of feel that I'm probably going to be setting most of the film up for you, and whilst I may not be going out and finding the finance for you, I'm to all intents and purposes going to be producing the film. And he said, well, in that case, let's give you a producer credit. I was like, okay, well, that's cool, and that makes all the hard work worthwhile. And so I produced Stuart's Exam, which was technically my first movie as a producer. And even whilst we were just finishing off the shoot for Exam, we were starting to get some traction with the King's Speech. We had agreed that instead of developing it for TV as we were originally thinking, because it was going to be a crossover piece for my business partner, who's a documentary director, we were going to do a sort of drama doc telling them, but we realised it was a much, much bigger thing. At the time that we were finishing off Exam, I was really starting to get the ball rolling with the King's Speech, and the King's Speech is, my second film as a producer.
I guess the transition so many people find tough is the one from student to then your first bits of work, and a lot of people either get hooked up through a great uncle or auntie, or but how did you find that transition from suddenly you're into like arguably the most competitive business in the world? How did you find that?
I was very fortunate. I went to a very good school. Ravensbourne was often considered the back door to the BBC, and my sort of media aspirations were more sort of TV based at the outset. I think it is a difficult time, and you do hear stories of nepotism and good fortune, but I'm now on the other side of the desk where I run a company, and with the film having attracted a lot of buzz, we're getting a lot of sort of interest from people that want to come and do work experience or do a couple of weeks paid work or whatever. And when we're looking at CVs, I'm not looking for my family members when I go through stuff like that. So, I think there are tales of people having good fortune through family connections or whatever, but that first jump just comes down to being prepared to work really, really hard and go the extra mile. I interviewed one kid a couple of weeks ago, and I said, well, why don't you just come and do a week's work experience unpaid for us and see how that pans out? And he proceeded to tell me for 10 minutes why I should really be paying him, and it was like, okay, cool. So we didn't go with him, and we went with the girl that was happy to put in a week for gratis and sort of, knocked our socks off, and we've just offered her a paid position. So, it's that case of, make sure those first few forays you are prepared to sort of graft and go that extra mile, because if not,
that's a great cautionary tale right there.
Yeah, if not, there's hundreds of people behind you that will do.
Exactly. Obviously, as you said, you worked extensively as a line producer and first AD for a 10-year period. What would you say some of the key lessons you learned about the business during that period that have helped inform going into the producing role? As opposed to, say, going in through, say, a development route or producing shorts and music videos, because there are all kinds of different routes into producing. How would you say your road in helped?
I think the one real benefit was I understood how the machine works, and there are clear stages of every film's life. There's development, pre-production, production, post-production, and then distribution. And what the firsting and the production management gave me was a real understanding of how a film unit works. And I've always believed that you'll never make great films if you don't know how the machine works, So you learn how to establish relationships with cast, you learn how to establish relationship with directors, you work out that, put a crate of beer on the back of the lighting truck at the end of the week means that you'll get lots of free overtime, not lots, but you get some free overtime the following, so you actually just, some of those things sound really trite and small, but you actually learn how to especially being a first AD, how to be diplomatic, how to get what you need from people, and sometimes that can be via a very direct route, in terms of telling your third AD you need 50 extras to go and stand over at that end of the field, or it may be a very indirect, subtler thing, like you're trying to sort of, you've heard that one of the cast has had some sadness in life, or something's happened, or dog's gone missing has happened on one film, and you learn how to just sort of cajole and coax and sort those. I think the one failing was obviously it didn't give me an idea of how maybe the film business with a capital B works, in terms of attracting finance, getting a film set up, and that side of things. And that's what's fun about my life at the moment, is that I'm now having the opportunity to learn how the rest of it works, and I very much try and keep my eyes and ears open and just sort of act as a sponge and just learn so much from some amazing people.
Were you actively reading a lot of scripts as well during this period, or was it a case of you were so busy that?
No, I mean, obviously you'd read the stuff that you're working on a sort of job to job basis, but we were looking for the first crossover script for Simon. I was reading a lot of work from a couple of writers, mates of mine. They would always send stuff to me to have a glance over, and even if you don't say that you're actively looking for stuff, there are a lot of writers out there that would just send stuff into you. So during that period, I was probably reading 2 or 3 scripts a week.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, the role of producer can vary hugely, both in terms of the individual and the role on a particular project. Now, how do you sort of view your role? Or producer's role?
Specifically on the King's Speech, or are we looking at just more generally
the
role of a producer?
More generally.
I think one thing that going through this process has taught me was trying to actually define what a producer does. And I think you're 100% right, and it depends on the film, it depends on the individual at play. But it is, there is a structured way where producers are now assessed. I mean, the PGA, which is Producers Guild of America, they actually ratify all of the Best Picture nominees, because the Best Picture nominations go to the producers. And there is a checklist of 30 things that you have to basically assess. Did you have a lot of involvement in? Did you have a little bit of involvement in? Did you have nothing to do with it? And you fill it out, and then they go to certain heads of departments, to the finances, and they check that you haven't been telling porkies. And that, going through that process of being nominated for the Academy, actually made me sort of sit down, because it was on the checklist form. It's like, oh, right, I didn't do that bit. Right, the next bit, I'm going to make sure that I do a bit of that, But I've always been a very hands-on producer. I enjoy an incredibly close relationship with the writers that I work with. I enjoy an equally pleasant relationship with most of the big finance outfits in the UK. I'm starting to get to know a number of the independent distributors over here. But I mean, I know that there is this myth that you can almost buy a producer credit these days, and yes, you do at the start of a lot of films see associate producers and co-producers and the producers and the executive producers and the co-executive producers. But one thing that we were really, really firm on the King's Speech was that the 3 of us that produced it were going to be the only ones that were to get a producing credit, and Ian Canning and Emil Sherman from Seesaw Films produced the movie with us.
How did working on Exam, obviously a micro-budget movie, help inform and prepare you for the King's Speech, or was it a completely different experience?
I think there were, very, very different experience. But because I was line producing and firsting on Exam, I had to do all of the paperwork, all the budget prep. I did all of the artist contracts. I did all of the paper machines. So when stuff was being sent by the King's Speech lawyers to me for approval, I knew how to navigate through those documents. I'd seen a SAG, not SAG, but I'd seen an equity contract. So it was very, very useful. The one thing, obviously, Exam didn't have to worry about was the involvement of different distributors or national organisations like the UKFC, etc., etc., etc.
Okay. And moving on to Bedlam, Bedlam Productions, that's your company. You obviously you've got your film arm, and you're also very active in TV and documentaries. How important do you think it is as a UK producer to have that sort of alternative revenue stream and not just rely on feature films for your income?
It's interesting because the thing is the assumption, which I think, I'm not putting words in your mouth, that you're making, is that, you know, the TV arm was a deliberate act to make sure that if things were scant with the films, that we'd still survive. It's actually the polar opposite of what actually happened. Basically, me and my best mate from film school, we have had our own individual careers as filmmakers in the UK and internationally. Simon has built a very good reputation as a documentary filmmaker. He's had a number of blue ribbon docs on the BBC and the various UK channels. And I always had a career that was developing through feature films. So with Bedlam, it wasn't that we were going, okay, we want to make movies, but we're scared of being skint, so we'll do some TV work. It was genuinely unifying two very established and good careers together under one company brand, and it really keeps me on my toes. It's really good stuff. I mean, we've just come out of we've just won a commission with Channel 5 and Nat Geo, and you know, it's great. It keeps you fresh, you know, sort of regularly doing negotiations and doing deals, and because they're all very, very different, and when you're dealing with True Life, it's a slightly different sort of model of business than when you're doing a completely dramatic creative work. So I think it's great, and you know, the company is strong because it has, you know, a firm foot in both camps. But it wasn't by financial design.
Kind of talked about a bit of this, but moving on to the King's Speech, you said the project first came to you as a stage play. Was that from an agent?
Basically, there was a lady called Joan Lane, who's a theatre agent, and she was repping David Seidler, the writer, at the time. And we'd had loads of stuff through from Joan. Bless her cotton socks, she sends us everything. And 99.9% of it is, being polite, not up to the par of what we're looking for. And the King's Speech was sent to us with 2 other projects, and she said, I think it's quite well written, you might like to take a look at it. And you know, we fell in love with it right from the off.
What was your next move?
Basically, we realised that it doesn't matter how good it was as a stage play, the powers that be, you can't take someone a stage play and go, this is going to be a great movie, or there's very few execs that will be able to get it, unless you can go, this stage play, which has been on Broadway or in the West End for the last 15 years, is now going to be a great movie, or this novel that's sat at the top of the bestsellers list for the last 5 years is going to make it. So we realised what we had to do was turn it into a screenplay. So what we did is we did a rehearsed reading with no name cast, where we got a theatre director just to workshop the stage play, and we shot it, just literally locked off camera, but we wanted to hear the words spoken. And that then informed the process of adaptation, where David basically took it from the stage play and turned it into a screenplay, so that we could actually tell people that we were trying to set up a film because it had a screenplay, you know, instead of going, we were trying to set up a film with a stage play. Sure. So that was the next step.
Okay, and how tough was it raising finance for the project in a time where period movies are, you know, a hard sell internationally?
I think there was a number of things that were going on at the time. The one which you've highlighted is that, you know, prior to our film, period movies were sort of often seen as costing, I mean, the gag is they cost you 4 times as much and you get 25% back in the box office. You know, prove that wrong. But it was difficult to set up because it's period. The other thing was just the financial climate at the time was horrific. You know, Lehman Brothers had just gone down. There was rumours that something might be happening with the UK Film Council, but we weren't sure whether it was going to adapt in its form or it was going to be a new thing. So it was uncertain times, and you know, uncertain times on a global scale as well. But we were very fortunate in as much as Ian has a first look deal with Momentum. They liked it enough to commit to a UK territory pre-sale. Once we had that in the bag, we then picked up Australia quite quickly because of the connection there with Transmission Films. And then the next one was the Weinsteins, and Harvey's people really aggressively came after the property. They'd seen an early draft of the script. They'd heard that, you know, we'd attracted our first couple of sales. And literally sent their business affairs guy over and said, "Don't leave England without that script," or so the story goes. So it was, you know, it was really tough, but it was more about being able to try and protect the integrity of the script and make the film on the scope and scale that we wanted to make it. You know, I had early in the film's life an offer to sort of get it into production quite quickly, but you know, is it only ever going to be, you know, £1 million budget sort of thing, and just would have been a very, very different telling of this story.
Sure. How did the casting process come together? Can you tell us a little bit about how the unorthodox way you approached Mr. Rush?
Yeah, not something that I recommend that people do, but we, through Joan again, we knew someone that lived a couple of doors down from him, and we realised that we needed to try and attract someone of some gravitas. And you know, if you read that screenplay and you read the character of Lionel Lowe, he is of a certain age, he is of a certain, you know, he's an Australian, he's, you know, certain age, all these sort of things, and
he's got a verbal dexterity.
Yeah,
too.
and it's that you know, that the potentials list starts to sort of winnow away quite quickly. When you're sort of thinking that. So basically, through this friend of Joan Lane's, we got the stage play, I think it was, because we hadn't even done the adaptation by that point. Got the stage play delivered to his house, and he now tells the story of how he woke up one morning and sort of came down in his dressing gown to go and get the post or the paper, open the door, and there's this little orphan script on his doormat. And you know, that's why, you know, Jeffrey then attached his name to it, which meant that we had, you know, some chops in terms of going to the financiers, and that, you know, that's why he's credited as one of the exec producers, because, you know, without that early faith and that early support of the film, you know, this could have ended up being the best story never told.
Sure. Going back to Harvey Weinstein, obviously he's got a formidable reputation within the industry. How have you found working with him, and what kind of unique qualities would you say he brings to the table that perhaps other distributors and financiers lack, maybe?
The Harvey question. It comes up all the time. I mean, the thing is that, I mean, there's a couple of things to mention here. Firstly, I think the relationship between the producers and the distributor, and people have to remember Harvey Weinstein, you know, is the American distributor of our film. But that relationship is based on trust, and he trusted us to make a good film, and we trust him to market and promote the film effectively. He is a formidable character. You know, we now, our email exchanges and text exchanges, it almost seems like we try and use as few words and as few letters as possible. I do remember being told very, very early on, I'd done something that a bit daft just through eagerness. And I said to one of our contacts within the Weinstein company, I was like, I hear I'm not in Harvey's good books anymore. And she just very, very calmly told me that Harvey doesn't have good books. There's just people he hates less that week. So I'd graduated to the more hated list of that week. But he's been good. He's good fun. And you know, we're intensely proud that we've been able to deliver a film that's got a man of his track record and history, you know, back in front and centre in the spotlight, and where he deserves to be, really.
Obviously, much has been made of King's Speech's success. If you had to identify kind of one factor above all the others that's been responsible for it being in the place it is, what would you say it is?
I'm only allowed one. I can
only
do it in
one.
two.
No,
I can do it in two.
One. No, you only get
okay.
one.
I'll do the first one, then roll straight into the second one. No, I think I think that the main reason is that it's a story of friendship, and how friendship can help you overcome obstacles in your life, and that's a very universal theme. I think we've all struggled with aspects of our life, whether it's because of well, it could be anything, you know, financial, emotional, whatever, you know, and the idea that friendship can help overcome and surpass those obstacles are quite key. I think the second reason, which you told me I wasn't allowed to cite, but I'm going to keep on talking without hesitation or pause. The other thing is that, you know, we live in an uncertain time and a fairly austere global stage, and I think that a lot of the current other cinema reflects that, and rightly so. It's you know, films are often a record of the time that they're made as much as their subject, and this is one of the few stories that is genuinely uplifting and inspirational that's out there as a film at the moment, you know. And I am a fierce advocate and fan of all of the other films that have been produced over the course of the last year, but there's very few that you come out of and you can sort of fondly remember some nice times during the movie and come out with a smile on your face.
Sure. Okay, when we interviewed Stuart Hazeldine, who
Yeah.
obviously wrote and directed Exam, he called Exam a low investment, high yield project.
Yeah.
Would you agree on that? And also, how important is that ROI right now in the film industry?
I think, Exam was where we all benefited from Exam was, I think it was proof positive that we knew what we were doing, we could make a film, and even though the budget was very low, that we could still deliver something that was of theatrical quality that could find an audience. In terms of return on investment for The King's Speech, the numbers are really clear. $15 million to make, and we went past $160 million worldwide yesterday. We passed in the UK box office alone Slumdog last night, and you start looking at those numbers. So I now have in my armoury when I'm pitching the next project the response that I wish I'd had on The King's Speech, the number of years ago when we were setting it up. But the numbers are fairly easy to see with The King's Speech.
Sure. Obviously, King's Speech is also one of the last projects to receive funding from UK Film Council. What's your take on its closure, how that was dealt with, and what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think first things first. The UK Film Council, without their contribution, this film wouldn't have been made in the same way. I'm not saying that as producers we would have let the film fall over if they hadn't come in, or that we wouldn't have found that money from elsewhere. But we are and will be eternally grateful to the UK Film Council for stumping up that money. In terms of the decision to close it, this isn't the forum for a political with a capital P discussion, but I think the government's dropped the ball. I think that you only have to look at their recent successes and the projects that they have been involved in to say that they've worked well. And I know the UK Film Council polarises people's beliefs. It tends to be that those that have never got any money from them hate it, and those that did love it. But they were invested in a broad range of film types and genre. They weren't just supporting films such as ours. And I think I think it's a drop ball that we won't carry them forward into the future. I hope the transition of power goes smoothly, because one thing as producers we don't want to see happen is there to be a misstep during that power transition. And I wish the BFI every luck with the new role that they're adopting. I will be knocking on their door, as I do with others, with projects to be set up. I think the one thing that someone once said that I do agree with, which is that the BFI is a charity, and do we really want to say to the world that the UK film industry is a charity? It's not. It's a business. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, and so there are some concerns I have along those lines, but we shall see.
Looking to the future, what can you tell us about your slate and what you've got planned for the future? One would presume that on the back of The King's Speech, a lot of Hollywood's doors that perhaps were, if not closed, then just ajar, are now fully open.
You'd think, Evan, it doesn't quite work like that. I was joking with my dad on the phone the other day, and I was telling Mark Lawson at Radio 4 this story, is that I'm still getting rebuffed, but it's just that I get the shitty emails now, not from the sort of second junior assistant, it's the executive assistant. But no, joking aside, I hope that the successes with The King's Speech will help Bedlam nurture and support further films. And I think the big question that a lot of distributors have is to try and get a sense of taste. If someone's taste will find an audience and will reach a market, and we've proved that now, well, both with Exam and The King's Speech, that we can do that. What we've got in an immediate development, I've optioned David Seidler's next script. Again, it's based on a true life character, Lady Hester Stanhope. She was the social secretary of William Pitt the Younger. She had access to the corridors of power in the UK at the turn of the 18th century, which was a time when women should just marry well, and that was it. So it's a sort of story of female suffrage, but not the suffragettes. It's not that big political story. And where we pick up Hester's life is between her time when she was travelling between Constantinople and Syria. Over a period of time, she ended up embroiled in this three-way love affair. with these two French spies and became a double agent for the British government and the court of Napoleon. So it's a sort of out of Africa but set in the Middle East with the backdrop of the Napoleonic Wars. That's the big flagship. But we've got another couple of properties that are in active development. There's a film about a guy called George Sadeh, who was the architect of the Iranian Revolution, and he had these three tempestuous love affairs, one with a Georgetown lecturer, one with a French journalist, and one which was actually his wife in Persia, and they didn't know each other until they actually met at his funeral, because Khomeini bumped him off. It's all to do with that. So there's that, and then there's Simon's directorial debut, African Ice. We're working with a young writer called Rob Messick. It's comedy. It's imagine Little Miss Sunshine in an ice cream truck in Africa. It's a guy trying to sort of return his mother's ashes, and he's an American Italian, and he ends up hooking up with this young black Londoner who thinks that the passport through Africa is the colour of his skin, and you know he doesn't know anything about African custom or how it all works. So it's a sort of odd couple in a van, which is good fun, and that's the three that are in really active development at the moment. Mm-hmm. There's a deep bench, to use a horrible Americanism, in terms of other properties that we're looking at the moment, but it's those three that are most active.
Okay, sure. And before we move on to our not quite famous but very popular quickfire round,
oh God,
what advice generally would you give to those people looking to move into producing?
Yeah,
I think
it's sort of it's. I think the reason I'm struggling with an answer on that is because I think it's markedly different if you're coming from a pre-existing career and you're looking to transfer or step sideways and become a producer. I mean, in that case, in that scenario, I'd just say, make sure that you really have an understanding of how the machine works. Make sure that you know how a film is physically produced. Start to read up on some of the bigger producers that you can read about, both here and abroad. Read Goldman's book, about producing in the States. And although you're not a 1980s film producer, there's so many sort of common stories of the difficulties that are faced. If you're talking about becoming a producer as an entry-level position and coming straight from film school and doing, low to no budget pop videos or a short or even a low budget feature, the one bit of advice I'd say, get out there and start working on it. It's never been easier than now to tell stories, and whether it's done through a scrawl on a blank piece of paper or using your dad's DV camera, or whether you can blag a deal with, Panavision and get a full 35 shoot, however you tell your story, just get out there and start telling stories, because you don't become a producer until you start producing, so get producing.
Okay, quickfire round. Yeah. Favourite ever film?
John de Florette.
Your favourite screenwriter?
Aaron Sorkin at them. Oh shit, no, don't use that. When does this go out?
Whenever.
After the ballots close?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm allowed to. Okay. David Siegler. Use Sorkin.
Favourite director?
Tom Hooper. Can you see which way this is going to go?
Sorry, favourite performance by an actor?
Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot.
Great choice. Favourite TV show?
At the moment, Modern Family.
And ever?
West Wing. That's why I said Sorkin earlier. Sorry.
James Cameron or Ridley Scott?
Ridley Scott. Diddley Squat.
Mike Leigh or Ken Loach?
Oh God, neither. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That's fine. Pacino or De Niro?
De Niro.
Danny Dyer or Dean Gaffney?
Neither.
Your best ever moment on set?
Pogo. Actually, it wasn't on set. It was because I was shooting something. But pogoing with Tia Carrera in a Spanish nightclub to Eton rifles.
Brilliant. Your worst ever moment on set?
When 2,000 Mongol extras decided they weren't going to work for the day.
Last film you saw?
Oh shit. I watched it on the plane coming over. Due Date.
Last film you loathed?
You said Due Date then. No. Last film I loathed. It sounds incredible. This is a quick fire round. Shut up, Unwin. I haven't ever loathed a film.
It's impossible.
I don't know, because if it's that bad, I leave before I finish. before it finishes. So it's like
Fair enough. Last film you loved?
Last film I loved, King's Speech.
Your filmic guilty pleasure. There's got to be a movie out there where you know.
Toy Story 3 from recent times. You know, it's only now that people are actually going,
It's
"No,
not
you're allowed
trashy
to, you're
enough.
allowed
That's
to."
not trashy enough.
Right, okay. Trashy.
I mean, it would be something like
Okay,
Roadhouse or
I
Deep Blue Sea or something
Okay,
like that.
how's this? We watched the first night we arrived in Hollywood. I watched Pretty Woman with my fiance, and we went on a sightseeing tour the next day and found 6 of the locations.
Brilliant. Finally, apart from Stuart Hazeldine, who would be your dream dinner party guests?
My dream dinner.
Apart from Stuart Hazeldine.
You, what are you doing tonight? Luc Besson.
That's one. Anyone else?
Oh, in terms of we're allowed
Yeah,
a
you
few
can
more.
pick 4. Let's say 4.
Let's say 4. Luc Besson.
So it's dinner for 5.
Yeah, dinner for 5, and I'm cooking.
So it's you, Besson.
Me, Besson, Spielberg,
Okay.
Morgan Freeman,
Okay.
and
This is gonna be an all-guy party.
no.
Is this
I
gonna be
was going to say something effectively that could be misinterpreted, slightly misogynistic. I don't know. Helen Mirren, because I think she's the sexiest woman on the planet.
Brilliant. Gareth Unwin, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Surprisingly painless.